If you record audio for any purpose, chances are you want it to be heard. You want to attract the largest audience possible who can hear your message. That's where we come in. We're cyberears.com, a revolutionary internet service that will host your audio files and help you promote and track its popularity. Considering hosting a podcast to the world? We have all the automated tools to make the process as simple and easy as it can be. No technical mumbo-jumbo to work out. Cyberears.com does all the work for you. You record it, we take care of the rest. So don't delay. Go to cyberears.com today and register for a free trial account. Upload your audio files and get heard. With cyberears.com, it's your audio on your terms.
Jeff Ritzman, a very special introduction. How are you?
I'm tired.
Yes, I'm tired as well. I've been on a bus. A bus, I say.
Great. Did you enjoy your bus?
To visit you son of a...
Did you enjoy your bus trip?
In as much as one can enjoy 10 hours on a bus, yeah, sure.
Okay. Ain't meeting any interesting characters on the way?
Just you and your wife at the end of the road.
Oh. We're characters now in your little fantasy, right? Is that how this works?
No, I'm actually at your house,
son of a bitch. That's
Jeff,
right.
I'm actually here.
Yes, you are.
And that can only mean one thing, that Sunday's live show is going to be 1/3 less delays between phone
Hey,
lines.
there's a trick for you. Lee will be the only one in delay.
That's right. So, tonight we have a special sort of, I don't know, it's almost like an intro into Project Core episode in that it's so wild and wacky all over the place. It is the story of Alta and Chad Dillard. They are a couple who have had paranormal stuff in their lives individually, and then when they came together, more paranormal stuff, but from all over the map. And it's the type of stuff that we're trying to piece together with Project Core, all in one case, as it were.
Yeah, yeah. And as you can hear, that the apparent reasoning behind their experiences happening at all is, how should we say, rather obvious.
Well, yes.
I think I put it in different terms actually during the interview, which you'll hear in a moment. So
yeah. This week, I received from one Emma Woods some new audio of our good friend Dr. David Jacobs. Should we save that for the live show on Sunday?
Sure, let's do that.
All right. So tune in live, 10 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, and we'll lead with that, I guess, and then we'll go from there. It ain't pretty, folks. Once again, it ain't pretty. What do we need to say here? I just want to say about Project Core, it's only been up a few days. I thought by the end of 10 months, maybe we'd have 100 people, and we're almost there, and it ain't a week.
Yeah, it hasn't even been a week. It was deluged the first day, and then Whitley Strieber put it up on his little feed on what? That was yesterday, right?
Yeah.
And since then, it's been deluged yet again. So we are approaching. I mean, I would say 100 by tomorrow.
Yeah, easily. Yeah.
Easily that. And we've read through some of them, and all of them are pretty thorough, I would say. I mean, the only thing that I would ask people kind of going forward is, I think, and it's been a minority, and I know I'm probably picking at this, but I think it would be a good idea to expound if you want. I mean, those of you who have already written a lengthy response, you don't have to worry about it. And even those who've written a short one, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Just we'll carry on from here. But going forward, those writing into the summary box, that summary box will take quite a bit of copy. So you don't have to worry about the length of what you're typing quite so much as I think it might convey by its size on the page. It will scroll. We will get your story. So feel free to expound as much as you like on that, keeping in with the guidelines with what we have laid out there as far as leaving your interpretive things out of it, or how you interpret it out of it, just the facts. So you can expound pretty well in there, I'd say.
Yeah. And maybe we'll put some verbiage up to that effect so that it's obvious to people.
Yeah.
All right. I'm tired. You're tired. Let's not belabor the point any, because we've got a long and very interesting interview ahead of us.
Yeah.
So without further, with a little further ado, how about this? How about we help them out by plugging? They don't really have a website, but they would like you to visit them on Facebook. Alta is spelled Alta. Chad is, Chad. Yes. And Dillard is Dillard. So they're both on Facebook individually, but they also have a little business on Facebook. If you go to Facebook groups, you can search out Jeff.
That would be Unique Rabbit Shawls, and that is U-Neek Rabbit, as in bunnies, and Shawls, Shawls. Search that out on Facebook.
Yes, Facebook groups. And we better get out of here before that vacuum cleaner sucks us up.
It's going to eat us. My wife likes to do late night house cleaning at, 1:10 a.m.
I don't know if you guys can hear that, but something tells me that's all you can hear.
Damn.
Without further ado, here are Alta and Chad Dillard. Paratopia, without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome to the program Chad and Alta Dillard. This is going to be exciting because I don't know what's going to happen. This is one of those things where we haven't vetted anything, and but from what Alta had written to me, sounds like you have myriad high strangeness experiences, which actually weaves in nicely with the launch of Project Core this week. So welcome to the program, Alta and Chad, and thank you for being willing to share your stories with us.
Well, thank you for having us on. We appreciate it.
So where do we begin? Now you'd mentioned possible Marian visions and Bigfoot and all sorts of stuff. Where does this begin for either of you, and how does it come together for both of you?
Again, thank you for having us on, and I'll go ahead and lead off with, first of all, I'm 10 years older than Chad, so, got 10 years in maybe advanced opportunity for what I call all of this high strangeness. I'm understanding that with my mother when I'm a baby, have a UFO encounter out in the middle of the desert. I'm from the desert, from the Southwest originally, and then that's all that I'm aware of. My mother has passed on, so I don't have her to question about any of this.
She told you about this.
Right. Well, not only did she tell me, and not really me, actually, she would tell people. She would tell people that not just everybody, but people that she was comfortable with. And, what I remember is that nobody ever questioned her. She was never challenged on it. I certainly never challenged her on it. I remember always hearing it, took note of it, but really didn't think any more about it, as weird as that sounds. I have no memory of any of this. And then we just kind of keep moving forward here. I don't have really childhood memories until I'm about 9 or so. And when I start really checking in, if you will, I can remember early on what I consider ghosty types of experiences or poltergeist, all of the above in that manner. And not really thinking it too strange. It almost seems normal for whatever reason in my world. My mother also told people that she was comfortable with, and I do have some memory of this. We lived in Aurora, Colorado, when I'm probably about 8. And that's about 8, 9 is when, as I say, I start remembering things. I remember her telling people, and as I said, I have slight memory of it, of living across from a military hospital, and this would have been during the Nam period, and her telling people that I was taken there, she took me there to this military hospital to have me tested for the language was ESP. Again, never challenged. Nobody challenged any of those statements, nor did I. And
what does that mean that you were taken there? What is the language was ESP? What does that mean?
I'm tested for ESP.
You were tested for ESP at a military hospital?
Right. It's called Fitzsimmons Hospital in Aurora, Colorado. And what I mean by the language is during that, I don't remember anybody saying the word psychic.
Mm-hmm.
The language that was used was ESP.
Oh, I see. And so did they have a program of testing people there that you know of, or how did it come about that you would end up there?
I have no idea. I know nothing, actually, about it. I'm just repeating what I have slight memory of,
mm-hmm.
and I do have some memory of actually cards being put up in front of me with a barrier and me having to repeat what, I could invisibly see, basically.
Okay.
And again, like I said, my mom, throughout my life, my young life, she would say this to people or mention this to people. So that's it as far as in my world.
Well, do you remember being taken there and shown that, or do you feel like your snippets of memory are based on influence from your mom having told you that that's what happened?
I would say yes to both.
So you do think that it actually happened?
I do feel that the snippet of memory that I have is accurate, and that's being at a location where there is a barrier between myself and someone else, and cards with pictogram, circles, symbols.
Right. Now, do you have a good long-term memory in terms of just sort of normal memories? Do you have a good memory of childhood?
Well, not until, as I said, I don't really have any memory until about this time, until about 8, 9 years old.
Okay, because I'm trying to get a feel for what you would have remembered about childhood normally. I mean, would you have just normal snippets of, I was out playing, or, any of that sort of stuff, if it feels like that type of memory or not?
I'm sorry, are you asking me about the experience at the hospital?
Yeah, I'm trying to get a sense of, do you have a sort of good long-term memory of other normal sort of childhood things, but when it comes to the military hospital, it's not clear? Or do you just not have a decent long-term memory, as most of us don't, of childhood to begin with?
Right, I do not.
Okay.
Yeah, that has been, I was raised an only child with no one to reflect back with. As far as, not having, as I said, early childhood memories.
Okay.
That the military business, that hospital situation, that's clear for me because I can clearly remember watching helicopters fly in and land at this hospital. That's a real clear memory.
Mm-hmm.
To confirm for me, yes, indeed, that's a military hospital, and, just helping piece it together in that regard. That I do have that snippet of memory of it, and my mom saying it throughout the years. And
are you psychic, or do you have ESP?
My understanding is yes. It's not something that I've spent too much time in regards to these experiences expounding on, but I was a professional medium at the time that the three of us were taken off that corner that I originally would have, mentioned to you. I was involved and has been written about in a book in New Orleans. I have honorable mention, if you will, of, that as my employment.
Okay. And how did you, I don't want to screw up the timeline here, so maybe I'll just ask you to just keep going.
Right. Well, so what I was going to do is I'll let Chad now go ahead and pick it up as far as his early childhood experiences. They're in both our cases, very brief.
As far as early childhood, about the only strange thing that went on, my father was a rice farmer in Arkansas, and out beside the house in the crops one day there were 3 burnt circles out beside the house, and they were unexplained. Couldn't figure out what was going on. Another time. This was after my parents divorced. My dad was with his second wife, and they came home, and the whole house was rearranged. So, but as far as early childhood, that's about the only strange things that that kind of pop out into my head.
Okay, and then where does it pick up? Does it pick up with you at 9 years old as well, or not until later in life?
Not till later on in life. There's the two incidents I just mentioned were before. Let's say the burnt circles were before I was 7. I'd say 6-ish, and then when the house got rearranged, I was probably 12.
Do you know what was going on? Maybe you said it and I just missed it, but what was going on in your parents' lives when the house got rearranged?
Well, my stepmother, or this is my ex-stepmother now, but she considered herself a white witch. I believe they were living in Denver at the time, and like I said, I was with my mom at this time, but I really don't remember a whole lot. Just remember the stories that Dad would say, "Hey, we came home and the whole house was just rearranged." And not in a junky matter, it was like they rearranged the house the way they liked it. They didn't, harm anything or break anything. They just moved.
All right. So then, what happened next? That's it for childhood, and then what?
Okay, I'll go ahead and pick it back up. Just this timeline. Chad and I are. We meet in 1990. I consider a lot of high strangeness around that in itself. We marry in 1991. We decide very early on never to have children. We are now in 1995, the very end of 94, the beginning of 95. We are newly relocated to Louisiana. We are living temporarily. We know when we move there that we're not going to be there permanently, if you will. We're living outside of, not far from Baton Rouge, and in a very small community. While we're driving one evening to go to dinner, we come around a corner. Chad's driving, I'm passenger. It's nighttime. We see a massive UFO, a massive craft. And UFO because I absolutely can't identify it. It overloaded me, is the only way I know how to say it. I saw, but I turned my head instantly. It was too big. I'd like for Chad to give you a little more explanation about that, and we'll keep the timeline moving along.
Okay.
Well, what we were doing, again, like Alta said, we were driving into town for dinner. We had come around this group of trees in this corner, and back behind the group of trees was this Walmart shopping center. And it was one of the super Walmarts. And as we come around, we look up in the sky, and this craft is huge. It's kind of a rectangle. It's shorter, or short. It's not as wide in the front as it is in the back. It's dark, metallic, moving real slow, like almost not moving. Had just a few lights, maybe 5 or 6 lights on it. When we came around, Alta and I kind of both looked at it. We both looked at each other, and without saying anything, was like, what the hell is that? And then we just kind of just kept driving. Like, okay.
How high overhead would you say it was?
I'm sorry?
About how high overhead would you say it was? How high up in the sky?
It was low. It was, I'm not really sure. Couple thousand feet, maybe. It wasn't. It's not as. It wasn't as high as like an airplane would fly or anything. It was low. It was. Okay. It felt like you could almost reach out and touch it.
Okay. And did anything happen with it? Was there any sort of, I don't know, communication, anything along those lines?
No, it just kind of freaked both of us out. We turned away from it and just headed on to our destination. The next day there was a write-up in the newspaper, and so we're not the only ones to see it.
When you see things like this, when you see UFOs and knowing that your stepmom was a witch and you had sort of, I don't know, poltergeist or perhaps quote-unquote demonic activity back then, I mean, do you put these things together in your head or do you keep them separate? One is, you know, UFOs, one is this, one is that. Do you keep them compartmentalized or do you see them as a pattern of things?
I don't know. I think they're kind of maybe related by a hair. You know, I don't really. I kind of keep them separated, but together. I don't know.
I, on the other hand, see it all blended.
Mm-hmm.
Chad and I see very differently on much of this. I'll also interject with that question that you've just asked. I told you, in my estimation, my understanding, a lot of high strangeness and Chad and I being brought together in 1990. But just, you know, one of the strangeness of it that I can say very quickly is that my first name is somewhat unusual, Alta. I've never met any other Altas. I know that they exist, but I've certainly never met any men with this name. And upon meeting Chad, we discovered within 24 hours of meeting that his grandfather, who had a great hand in raising him, his birth name is Alta. And then just to amp it up a little, I discovered my mother's maiden name because there were many secrets in my life. But I did discover my mother's maiden name, and Chad's grandfather's last name are the same. So essentially, that was just too almost strange for me to even comprehend.
Right.
You know, I am Alta Duncan, essentially, and that is Chad's grandfather's name. I'm from the Southwest, told I'm of Native American and European distraction, and Chad's from Arkansas, you know, with nothing to meet in the middle. That was just the beginnings of the strangeness.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me add that in.
Sure. Well, thank you. So what happens after the UFO, and how soon after the UFO?
Again, I'll just kind of pick it back up, and Chad and I will be sort of doing a dance with this. We have this experience. We basically don't speak about it. We just don't talk about it and go on with our life. In a short amount of time after this happens, this is, as I said, in 95, within the same year, we're now moving to the French Quarter of New Orleans, which is, I don't know, within a couple hours of a move from where we were at. We, in 95, moved and now are working and living in the French Quarter of New Orleans. In that experience, all kinds of craziness, that's my term for it, seemed to be happening to us in the form, again, of ghosty. I don't use the word demonic. I've never heard Chad use that term, but we leave it to anybody's interpretation. Time slips. This was the period of time that I had what appeared to be Marian apparition. At the same time I have this encounter with this Marian apparition, or what appears to be the Marian apparition, there are 3 other, what I understood at the time were slaves, African American females, that had died on this property, that had been slaves. There were slave quarters that had been turned into apartments in the location we were living at first. So, you know, just all kinds of strangeness was happening to me specifically.
So when you say it, potential Marian vision, or maybe a Marian vision, what about it was, well, what happened? What's the confusion about?
Well, the reason I say, you know, and I'm trying to be specific about, she did not tell me that that's who she was, nor did I ask. She appeared in a veiled appearance. This was a veiled female that had a glow, and everything about her connection to me. When I say veiled, she looked, as I've seen so often it illustrated, the Virgin Mary. She just had that appearance, and that's what I thought I was experiencing. But again, it wasn't anything that she said.
Well, what happened leading up to it? How did she come about?
She came about with, Chad and I had completely, we'd moved into an apartment that was livable in terms of the rent, so on. It's very expensive to live in the quarter. We couldn't live in the style that we wanted to when we first moved there. We had to work up to this because of availability and so on. So this place we moved into, we completely kind of overhauled it. We were renting, and it was actually an apartment that was above the Voodoo Temple. And this Voodoo Temple had a huge courtyard where there were chickens in the coop and the whole 9 yards. Chad and I, neither one of us knew nothing about voodoo, nor were we interested. We needed an apartment. We discover this apartment becomes available to us. Now, in my mind, after all these years, I'm seeing all of this very strange. But this is our reality. This apartment becomes available to us. The voodoo priestess had an altar in her temple that was all to Native American. I have all my regalia. She knew this and was very interested in us basically being in business with each other. She was very involved in tourism. And also movies that were always made in her courtyard, basically, involving her voodoo temple and so on. So it was commercial. It was a big business for her. I thanked her, but I made it clear I had no interest. We were trying to be polite. We just needed an apartment. Chad and I completely redid this apartment. We painted it. We did everything that we could do. In this, what I consider experience, this time slip is the only way I know how to say it. All of a sudden, I'm in my living room, and it's shabby, and it looked much worse than even when we had moved in. And it was filthy, very tattered, and gloomy. And all of a sudden, as I'm observing this around me, I turn, and there are three, as I say, African-American females that are standing side by side, just kind of an arm's length in front of me. And they're very giddy, and they're happy. They're so happy. Their energy was vibrant. And they kept reaching out and just kept saying they wanted to touch me, and they wanted me to touch them. And they were extremely, as I said, shabby looking on their external. Their hair was crazy. Their dresses or whatever they had on ripped and torn. But their energy was electrifying in love. That's the only way I know how to say it. And then the next thing I knew, I felt a presence standing directly behind me. And I pivoted around. There wasn't even room to completely turn around. And as I was pivoting around, this veiled female that had a glow was standing right there. And we were eye to eye. And I got myself turned completely around, and she opened her arms and as if she was choosing to embrace me, and I leaned into her. And it's a feeling I've never felt before or since. And when I say that, I mean that in its most loving form. And she whispered in my ear, and she used my name, and she said, "Alta, you must get stable." These were the words that she used to me. This was her language, and upon making that statement to me, it all stopped. And what I mean is it all reverted back to its original form as I remembered it after we had redone this apartment. They disappeared, and I just was very puzzled. I had a feeling of love, that I knew it was real, whatever that means, but I extremely puzzled.
What time of the day was this?
This would have been late afternoon, before sundown.
And you were not asleep. You were up walking around.
Right.
And just all of a sudden, boom, the environment changes and this happens.
Everything changed.
And did you ever see her or any of them again?
Never, no. No, but
can I ask you, before I miss something here, she said you must get what?
Stable.
Stable.
Okay. I'm
The
sorry.
word was stable.
You must get stable.
Right, what I've always found interesting is there was no preaching, there was no religious terms, no nothing in that regard. Certainly in what appeared her appearance to me, but certainly not her language, because it wasn't long after this happened and Chad and I and Jacqueline, 3 of us, have a night of what I call missing time and so on. And this was all what feels like preparatory. Almost, like I said, I can only tell you my feeling on that. It felt like it was preparing me for what was coming.
Well, before we get to what's coming, let me ask you, at what point did you become a medium, and how did that come about?
Thanks for asking. As far as becoming one, it came with the package. And how it came about was a prophetic dreamer when I'm young, having very adult dreams, prophetic dreaming. I'm also told I'm of the Nez Perce. I'm raised traditionally Nez Perce or Nez Perce, and there's a section or a group of the Nez Perce that are known as the Dreamers. My mom always believed or understood that I was inheriting something from that experience because she's always claimed to never have anything so-called psychic of her own. So it was an understanding in my immediate family that my mom seemed very pleased about and concerned about all in the same breath.
Well, when define a medium, is it a channel or is it someone who sees spirits? What is a medium?
Well, I just consider myself, what I found myself being is in the middle of, my understanding is the middle of whatever the veil is that somebody is trying to understand. If they've got a veil over them, this question or whatever it is they're trying to pursue, I had an ability to oftentimes, of course, this wasn't being done professionally or what have you, or studied to the best of my knowledge by my mom. Other than that experience in that hospital of being tested, I have no idea why that happened. It's never been explained to me, and I can't find any reason. But what ends up happening is because I have this ability, it's not something I acted on to try to make a living from it or any of this thing, to even offer it to anyone. When Chad and I moved to the French Quarter, I needed a job, literally, and sought employment. And by doing so, I walked into a shop, and this gentleman that owned the shop had, it was for tourism. And I just asked, he had a help wanted sign. I asked about the position. Something very bizarre took place for me in my explanation of this bizarre, as I'm remembering the experience. It was on my birthday. My birthday seems to trigger a great deal in my life. But this gentleman had a bag on his hip that he had symbols in. He met me. He knew right then he wanted to hire me. He acted almost as if I was familiar to him. I'm freaked out, period. I'm just trying to get a job and figure out where I'm at. Chad's just reminded me also he had a familiarity to him looking like an uncle in my family, like a family member. He asked me a little bit about my history as far as my background. I share with him my native background, where I come from or where I told I'm from. He reaches over on his hip and he pulls this bag off his hip, and they have symbols in it. It's a rabbit pouch or some kind of an animal fur pouch. And he puts them in my hand, and he tells me to look at them. I'm trying to give you even the short story on this. And the bottom line is that these symbols were, of my understanding, my family. Meaning, my mother tells me that I'm from the band of Chief Joseph. Chief Joseph was one of these symbols. My mother's told me that I come from the land of Geronimo. We do a lot of practice in our tradition of his territory and their dance and their style. He's another one of these symbols. As I'm looking at this, I'm freaking out because this guy doesn't know me from nothing, other than this little bit I've shared with him. The next thing I know, this man tells me to use these symbols. And what he meant by that was literally, he wanted me to go into a room with this stranger that had come in to ask for a reading and use these symbols. And that's just what I did. He threw me in head first, and what I discovered was that the symbols gave me an opportunity to talk fast and connect fast. I trusted what I was seeing, and thus that's how I got involved in that on a professional level.
So it's not as though you see ghosts, is what I guess what I'm trying to figure out.
Right, I don't see dead people.
Okay, so when you saw these slaves and this vision,
that's right.
That was completely surprising to you. You'd not seen anything like that?
Thank you so much for that, Jeremy. That's just amazing. No, that was not normal for me. That is not normal for me.
Were you scared on any level? I know that you felt love in the moment, but was there anything frightening about it?
I have to say, absolutely was not. There was not. No, not at all.
What
I was
about with
in
the UFO?
Amazement. I just was so amazed because I was taking it all in, and on so many levels it felt like. But fear was not one of them.
Have you felt fear with any of the experiences you've talked about so far?
Yes, when I saw the craft, it was so massive, it shocked me. I don't know if fear is it certainly felt, I'm not sure if fear is the correct word or not, shock, because I could not look at it.
Okay. So,
and the fact that we never discussed it, I thought, well, that's just crazy for my nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, just crazy for my nature. I'm so inquisitive.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, that seems to be a common factor in this, is not talking about it or the just going on with life. I mean, even in thinking about an abduction, the fact that you can go to sleep, well, the next thing I know, I wake up. It's like, well, how did you go to sleep? You were terrified,
Exactly.
There is something strange and compelling about all of that maybe one day we'll discover the answer to, but I don't know.
Exactly. If I may, Chad had experience there also. His manifested in a different form, if he could share that with you real quick. At the same location where I'm having what I called what appeared to be Marian apparition, and these three female, Chad had a separate experience.
Yeah, this was probably the first or second night that we had lived in this apartment. Again, this was above the Voodoo Temple. And we're in bed, we're asleep, and I would wake up throughout the night feeling like something was on me, like a bug or something, crawling across my chest. And I'd wake up and I would scratch, and, by the next morning I had, dug down a couple of layers. I get dressed, I go to work, and throughout the day I start remembering, what had happened to me. And it wasn't anything crawling on me. What I remember was this very small-frame African-American man, torso, just his torso up, arms and his head and torso. Below his waist was kind of cloudy. And he was I was laying in bed on my back, and he would take his hand or his finger and just kind of tickle right on my chest, right above my heart. And I would go up and I would scratch it, and he would pull his hand back. So this happened, throughout the night. Well, that night, that day after work, I come home and I grabbed the smudge stick, and this without Alta's Native American background, we always had a smudge stick around. So I do the smudge real quick and tell him, hey, I'm going to clean up the apartment. This is going to be a nice place for everybody, stick around. About 2 months later, another couple moved into the apartment below us, and they had been married by the voodoo priest, which had died a couple of months before we had moved into the apartment. And they said that they were going to bring out their wedding pictures. So they bring out their wedding pictures, and she hands me this picture of the voodoo priestess, or the voodoo priest, and it was the figure I saw above the bed, floating above the bed, tickling me on my chest. And that kind of freaked me out. That was wild. It didn't scare me. And like I said, it never happened again after, I told him that everything was going to be fine, that there's plenty of room for everybody in this apartment. I never had any problem, but it was kind of freaky.
Now, you guys were living above a voodoo place, right? So are you surprised by this?
Yes and no.
Yes, because I'm not a believer.
Mm-hmm.
Even after that, whatever that was, UFO, I was choosing to stay in shock and not deal. So I was shocked, yes.
Okay, well, let's, before I toss it over to Jeff, let's get to the missing time.
Okay, so we've got now from 95, moved in above that voodoo temple. That was very temporary, thank goodness. Like 3 months, I would say, is the duration or so of living there. As I've been saying, I feel like, for me personally, it was certainly preparing me. Now we'll fast forward to 1997. Chad and I have well moved into the quarter. We're living right in the heart of it in just this crazy, amazing, beautiful apartment with the balcony, the kind of thing you see on television, so on and so forth. And, our environment is what I understand many people who live in that area, that's what they aim for, is what we managed to move into. So location-wise and so on, we're quite happy. I'm becoming very successful, unasked for, in doing this work, doing readings, what seemed to be as simple as breathing to me. And it was all going so nice and easy. Chad was busying himself, doing what he was doing. He's a chef, and at the time, and so on and so forth. So, lots of activity for Chad. 1997, I'm working in a very exclusive reading salon. We have a new manager. Her name is Jacqueline. At the time, I'm just turning 40. Chad, as I said, is 10 years younger. He's 30. Jacqueline's 24. Jacqueline's single, never married before, no children. As I said, she's a new manager. She'd only been there probably a couple months building up for this event, what I call this event. She wants to go out. She's asked me if I want to go out one night with her in the quarter. I say, great, let's do it. Let's call Chad. He'll come meet us. Everything's on foot in the quarter, and as I've described, I think the quarter is something like 30 blocks or so square or rectangle. We begin our evening at one end of the quarter. Jacqueline closes shop, does her duties, so on and so forth. Our evening begins about 9:30 p.m. Chad has met us at the shop, and we're going to take off on foot and just wander through the quarter and just go out for the evening. Jacqueline has driven to work. She's parked her car down the street from the shop. We, as I say, are on foot. The short story on this is that everything is off. When I say off, the vibe is off. It's strange. To this day, I remember it clearly. I don't know what that meant at the time. I only know that it just felt weird. The quarter, this is also around the anniversary of when we were taken. The three of us remember collectively it was the first or second week of September in 1997. So this is around the time frame. This time frame is generally very slow in the quarter. It's a slow period of tourism. But on this particular night, it was slower than slow. It was very strange slow. Cricket slow, as Chad's calling it. As I said, it starts at 9:30 at night. By 11, we're only talking about an hour and a half. We've not had anything to drink and no drugs. All of us are sober with no opportunity for somebody to slip us something because of the way the night went. By 11 o'clock, my time frame is what I remember, is the last thing I remember. In an hour and a half time, from walking from one end of the quarter to the other, anything that was our normal was off that night, such as when we'd go into a location, never had there ever been a cover charge to go inside. On that night, there was a cover charge, door shut. We all, in a huff, said, we've never done this before. We're not going to start tonight. Everything was strange and off. And then, like I said, the last thing I remember was sitting on a stoop outside the last location we tried to have a party at, never going inside the place, staying outdoors. Chad was with me. We're on a stoop waiting for Jacqueline to decide whether we're going to, at this point, we just want to go home. And talking about calling a cab even and waiting for the cab or what have you. And that's the only thing I remember. Until the next day. Now it's around 8-ish or so the next day. I'm remembering 11 o'clock at night on a stoop. The next thing I know, it's around 8-ish a.m. I'm sitting straight up. I'm not waking up. I'm coming to, sitting in the middle of my living room, looking around, rubbing my arms, feeling something in my arm, knowing that I cannot account for how I got home and what the hell happened to me and where's Chad and where's Jacqueline. As I'm gazing around, I finally recognize that Chad is in bed. I'm very relieved. Chad wakes up about an hour following me, so his time frame is around 9-ish when he wakes up. We still don't know what's happened to Jacqueline. Again, the short story is because Chad has had regression. I don't know how if you're interested in him relaying to you what came through in his regression. But in my scenario, in my case, I have no memory of coming off that street and no memory of how I got home. But I am the only one out of the three that had some memory of the in-between experience. And then...
Well, let's hear what that snippet of memory is.
Okay, my snippet is I'm standing on the edge of a crater. It's gray around me, no color, but black and gray for the most part. The crater is somewhat shallow. There are people behind me that seem to be piled on top of each other. It's very bizarre. I don't take a lot of time paying much attention to them, which is strange, but I'm aware that they're there. Nobody seems to be upset. They almost seem checked out, turned off. Everyone's dressed. I'm dressed. There is a female standing directly next to me. Our arms are almost touching. We're so close to each other. She's quite a bit taller than I am. I had to crank my neck to look up at her. She was, this is always the most difficult part for me. She's exquisite in looks, exquisite in beauty. I realize beauty is perception, but everything inside of me said, this is perfect, this is perfection. She was over 6 feet tall. She had long blonde hair. She never spoke to me verbally. As I'm looking down in that crater, there is a structure down in the crater, a metallic structure of some sort. I don't see any kind of movement down there. There are lights around the perimeter of this crater that I feel were alive or had an intelligence of their own. Then, as I'm taking note of this, I look up and up into the sky above me. It's full of what appear to be stars, and they're way up there, and I'm very happy. In all of this, I'm extremely happy, like childlike happy, very happy to be with her. And when I look up in the sky, what I see are what I think are stars, and one begins to move and moves across the sky and then darts back. And in that motion, all of my joy and happiness and so on and so forth in a positive manner turned to straight-up terror. Just in a flash, just like that, I was terrified. And in that terror, my heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. And as that was racing, she, whomever she was, telepathically spoke to me and said, "Don't be afraid, they're just scanning you," was her language. And then that's all that I know.
When you say people were piled up behind you, do you mean literally bodies in a pile? What does that mean?
Literally bodies in a pile.
Like unconscious bodies or dead bodies?
No. I had no sense, like suspended animation, almost.
But piled one on top of the other?
Right.
Huh.
Didn't seem to have any look of, I'm looking fast and peripherally almost, and not dead on. And in that experience, I'm getting no sense that these people are in any trauma.
And when do you remember this? When does it come to you that this has happened?
Oh, the moment my eyes popped open. As I said, I didn't wake up. I came to, sitting up in my living room around 8-ish the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm instantly aware. I'm as aware, then as I am now of that snippet. I'd also like to share with you Jacqueline's experience.
Sure.
When you're ready. As I said, I'm coming to, though, literally, eyes popping open, looking all around me, having that memory, rubbing my arms, feeling something protruding out of my arm. Okay, so Jacqueline, she's put this in writing that she has made it clear that, she's pretty much leaving it as it is and is very comfortable with doing that with her memory and no memory of this experience. What we do know is that Jacqueline contacts us, a day or so later. I'm thinking it was a couple of days, literally, as Chad and I are privately losing our minds out of fear and so on and so forth with what has happened to her and what is happening. So when she makes contact, she is very upset and confused, looking for us to answer her questions that we can't. And what she relays to us is that she remembers the same, around 11-ish on that street corner, standing outside this club, never walking inside of it. She then, the next thing she knows, so it's around 11, the next thing she knows, she's been placed behind the steering wheel of her moving car. It's moving slowly. It's around 3-ish in the morning, so she's got from 11 to 3-ish missing that she cannot account for at all. It's gone. But the car is moving slowly. It hit a parked car and knocked off her rear view mirror, and it jolted her too. And this is literally how she woke up. The car was also in a whole other section of the city from where we knew that car had been parked that day, with no memory, of course. And I mean literally none in regards to any of it.
Well, I mean, just sitting here listening to it up to this point, Chad's mom is a self-proclaimed white witch. Alta is taken to or stepmom, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And Alta is taken to a military base for ESP, testing. Then they move into an apartment above a voodoo temple. So my answer to all this is, yeah, no shit.
Yeah, right. Right.
I mean, I'm sorry. No shit.
No,
really?
we agree.
Yeah. I mean, Alta, when you when you were taken to this base, or to this hospital, I should say, what year was that we're talking about?
See, I'm born 57, and I'm 8 or 9, so we're talking, I'm not good with math, the early 60s.
Okay.
65, 6.
Okay.
60.
And you don't remember really anything or any one particular person, or you just have this kind of vague memory of being shown flashcards, essentially. I mean, or something like that.
Right, that's it exactly. I have a memory of helicopters flying in and landing, which, might not seem essential to it, but for me it is, it is my memory of seeing these copters and then having this very brief flash of flashcards.
Okay.
And a white-coated individual. I have no military background connections in any way that I'm aware of at all, and Chad doesn't either. I'm not saying that means anything here, nor I'm just stating fact.
Okay,
and,
well, I'm just looking, most of the psychical research stuff, I mean, that was done, I think, militarily. Usually around the 1970s and up through 1995 or so. And those were followed up actually by, like early psychic research done at like Stanford Research and American Psychical Research, those kind of places. It was kind of a follow-up to what the federal government was actually doing. I'd be curious, did your mom ever tell you why she took you there for that?
No. And, this I'm very, very distressed about and have to get over it, because not even whatever psychic somebody refers to me as or thinks of me as or I bill myself as, I cannot get a handle on this. It has been very perplexing. I've tried to contact this location, this hospital, to no avail.
Okay.
I've just really been at a loss because I've had no help.
Right.
I'm lost, not knowing what I'm doing, but certainly not for lack of trying.
Did Mom ever say anything to you about, did she ever have the talk with you like she thinks you have a gift, or, God, I don't know. I mean, what does a parent say to a child when they believe that there's something going on that is beyond the norm? I mean, did she ever have that discussion with you? Yeah,
you just said that beautifully. Oftentimes the language would be used as gift. There were times that she would, and it wasn't so much with me. It was always in my presence with others.
Okay.
As I said, it never felt, when I would hear her speak of it, that it was anything that had shame connection to it or fear connection, with the exception of how was I going to play out my life with it. And I do remember taking note of that. Thank you. People have not really ever asked me about any of this, so I'm a bit embarrassed.
No, that's...
So thank you very much for that. It's very deep for me.
Yeah. Let me just ask this, and you can feel free to decline, and we'll edit out the show, but what kind of life did you have growing up? Do you feel it was very stable? Do you feel it was a bit wonky? Was
Real
it
wonky?
Really?
I love wonky. Wonky.
Okay, so very non-structured then.
There was no structure that I understand when I'm little.
Okay.
Can I just interject something, Chad? You're saying, are you agreeing that her life was wonky, or is yours wonky as well?
Actually, mine too.
It's a different wonky.
Yeah, it's different wonky, but yeah, we both had wonky lives.
Huh.
Chad has a lot of family. I have none. So the mother that I had left me in tremendous mystery in my babyhood, if you will, with a lot of mystery. But as far as wonky, that's just a perfect word. A lot of mystery with not any help to fill in some blanks. And in Chad's case, he's got lots of family. and very wonky.
But still very, very, like, not get up, get breakfast at the front table and go to school and then come home and do your homework. And, I mean, that whole sense of routine, was that present as much as you think it should be?
No, my dad was pretty much a hippie most of my life back in the 60s, and,
all free living.
All free living and all that kind of good stuff. And
right.
Mom was trying to take care of two boys, on her own, pretty much. And so, I had to pretty much I'm the oldest, so I kind of had to help, at 9 years old, start helping around the house.
Right. And Chad, how much background do you have in the, I guess, Wiccan? I'm going to ask, Wiccan or any sort of what the public would deem an occult practice. How much experience do you have in that department?
None at all. Like I said, my stepmother, she was a hippie too, so she was very into the Fleetwood Mac girl, Stevie Nicks, just that kind of airy fairy kind of stuff. Okay. Nothing where she would have the Ouija board out on Saturday nights or anything like that.
Right. Drugs in the house, Chad?
Occasionally.
Okay.
With my dad.
Okay.
My mom, not so much, maybe a little drinking, but not anything major.
Okay. How much experience with, for the both of you, how much experience with psychedelics do you have?
Very slim.
Okay.
Maybe once, maybe twice, but nothing, some shrooms maybe. That's about it.
How'd that go for you?
It was okay. I don't like not being in control or not being able to, move on and do what I need to do for the day and all that kind of stuff.
Join the club. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alta, what about you?
Same question?
Yeah.
Right. I don't like psychedelics. I've tried and, had my experiences when I'm young. Personally don't like them, and so not involved in them. And Chad's interjecting, neither one of us even drink alcohol now.
Right.
Any kind. And so as far as psychedelics, I don't remember ever having a liking for.
Right. Well, Alta, when you had your UFO sighting,
when Chad and I did?
When you both did. I mean, certainly, as Jeremy said, what you relate as far as seeing this thing and kind of not discussing it for a while.
Never.
Is typical in some weird way.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's not highly unusual, I don't think, for that sort of thing to go on. In fact, I've talked to a lot of people, including me, who had the same kind of thing with my wife and didn't talk about it for quite a while. Now, the question is if you walk yourself through that and you think about it, is there anything out of the ordinary about that night in particular of seeing this thing that doesn't seem to add up or doesn't make sense? Or was it you saw it and you moved on and end of story?
There it is. Saw it, moved on, did everything I could to dismiss it.
Okay.
And I say that without any effort. Literally, I feel that what I was doing and have done at the time in particular was it never saw me. If I don't acknowledge it, it didn't see me.
Okay.
And if it didn't see me, it didn't happen. I know that's crazy, but it was too big.
Well, yeah, it gets to be too much after a while.
It was too big. My head exploded.
Yeah, yeah.
We never, didn't study it, haven't studied that stuff, not into UFOs, not into space, not into any of it.
Okay.
I have a native background, as I've said, and, subjects like Sasquatchy, I try to make fun out of all of it. Certainly, I heard my mother, she was considered an elder, a native elder. She was highly respected in the community. I heard my mom talk often about, these kinds of subjects. Now, my mother loves space. She'd have given anything, I feel, to have been in our place, to have had these experiences. I could be wrong, but she always spoke about her desire to go out in space and so on, and I thought she was crazy. I just thought, what a really weird thing to say, but, more power to her.
Yeah.
Just listen to her and kind of in awe, but never question too much. So
now when you left home and you and Chad got together and started life essentially in New Orleans, again, what was life like at that point? Was it more structured for you? Was it less? I mean, were both of you just kind of flying around the breeze at the time, or was this like a real planned event that was set up ahead of time and you had a definitive plan laid out for yourselves?
I really like for Chad to talk. He's taking a moment processing. I can interject very quickly. It's called survival. We were both in a motivated state of survival, in the sense of we understood work was number one, and ultimately to have the kind of environment of living in that we chose to, we knew it would take a lot of work, and earning a good income, so on and so forth. So that kept us very motivated and kept us very focused.
Okay.
But it was certainly not planned in any regards. Nothing structured like that, and we're neither one of us in that kind of thinking. Very in that experience, very in the moment. This is what we have to do to achieve what it is that we're trying to achieve. Kind of, just that sort of normal thinking, but certainly not free flying.
Okay.
We understood we had a duty to do, and that was to honor ourselves, which was in a community of 24/7 bars, 24/7 nonstop party.
Right.
It was a very interesting environment for a fairly young couple with no children.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Imagine.
Yeah, well, and I can just point out for our audience that that's an incredibly anti-structural city. I mean, you've got just about everything that you could want as far as an anti-structural life. I mean, you've got partying, you've got probably, I would say, well, at least in my opinion, you got more than your fair share of taboos being broken around that town than most, I would say.
Absolutely.
Especially at certain times of the year.
Absolutely.
Now, when you see this, we're going to call it the Marian apparition, but in fact, we really don't know if that's what it is or not, but we're going to call it that.
Right, just an appearance.
And you say that the words to you were, you need to get stable.
Right, Alta, you must get stable.
What did you think of that? What do you think of that now? I mean, how do you interpret that statement?
I interpret that as preparing us for what was coming. Because what was coming was not going to allow for me to have the luxury ever again, as long as I had consciousness, to not know that something much bigger than I could wrap my brain around was happening to us. Lesser people, I will say this, in Chad and my honor, I will say this, that lesser people than Chad and I may not have survived just living in the quarter, the whole circumstance, the whole experience. We knew, I would say this about myself, I knew far greater that went down and couldn't get back up again because it's a crazy environment and energy that is a constant, that absolutely, in my mind, preparing us for what we could never close our eyes to again.
Okay.
There were three of us.
Right.
One of us isn't related to us. And whatever has happened to us, just on that one event, has made it really difficult for me personally. I've just been recently called desperate, and I found that very hard to accept.
Sure.
That what I'm trying to do is find others and give a voice to these experiences. And that has been now, identified as Alta's desperate.
Yeah,
when
sure.
in fact, I don't see this as desperation. I see this as sharing.
Right. Absolutely.
And we love the questions. Most people won't ask us questions. And so we've had nowhere to go with any of this.
Right.
Can I interject another question?
Please.
Jeff?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to invade your time. But when you say that quote from the Marian apparition means, it's a preparation for something you're not going to be able to sort of turn away from, what about any of this stuff wasn't already that leading up to this? I mean, it's already been a lot of, quote unquote crazy things that you can't really, that would alter your perception of reality leading up to this.
Absolutely.
So could it have meant something else?
Absolutely.
Can I interject to what I think it might have been?
Go on.
Because Jeremy already knows what I'm going to say.
Please do.
Just listening to your life history a little bit, and I know it's a brief history that we can fit within a podcast here.
Right.
I almost feel like, or it almost sounds like to me, that whatever this was communicating that you need to get stable means that you need to structure your life in such a way that essentially the paranormal manifestations or what have you leave you alone. In other words, you don't have this life. You don't have to live with this intrusion all the time. If you view it that way, I mean, I don't know how you view it. I don't know how you've come to terms with what your experiences have been. But it almost sounds to me like she's saying you can't live in this twilight world of essentially anti-structural life that is breeding essentially paranormal manifestations that appear to you. That's not to say these things aren't real. It means to say they're more real than real. And so, just hearing that immediately when you said you need to get stable, I'm like, yeah, no kidding.
Right.
Because, I'm of the belief that some people can handle a little.
Right.
I question how many people can handle consistently for years on end manifestative experiences with this phenomena. I mean, I question how far is too far, and I've met some people that it's been too far. And my personal belief is that it can make you mentally unstable.
Oh, boy.
I mean, that's just, I've seen that. And I've seen that, and yet I've seen crazy people who have basically, independently verified sightings, experiences, weirdness surrounding them. So my question is, again, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Were they crazy first? And for some reason, this anti-structural life that they have to live, they attract the phenomena, or did the phenomena make them crazy?
Right.
And, something telling you that is clearly not of us, not internal, not, something that is externally generated and showing you and saying to you, you need to get stable.
Right.
It almost sounds like something's trying to save you the burden of seeing too much.
Right. I'm taking, powerful note to every syllable you're saying, Jeff. I just would like to also offer, because I realize we're on a short time frame here.
Yeah.
And I have done the basis of the talking, but I'd like to add, as you're processing all of this, so appreciative to you for even giving us the time. These experiences got much crazier and stranger after we left the quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's been so bizarre for me. And like all of it hasn't. All of it absolutely has. No question about it.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that I struggle so with childhood memories has been very difficult. But
that alone can be a huge issue. I mean,
absolutely, and I absolutely take note of it. But we've got Chad here on the other side of this picture who has a family that he's very connected to, that are all around us here in this community, and his family are having their own separate UFO, Bigfoot encounters.
Mm-hmm.
Leading up to us moving here.
Uh-huh.
They're having them separate. Now, his folks are not interested in any regard of having anything to do with any of this.
Right.
No conversation. No engaging in trying to understand anything.
Can I ask why you moved back to there?
Yeah.
No, it was just time for me to get out of. It was time to leave New Orleans. And luckily, it was right before, a couple of years before Katrina. So.
Oh, okay.
Which it was funny because I told a guy that was here visiting from New Orleans, from the Ninth Ward. Yeah, he had a place over in the Ninth Ward, and he came to visit, and we were like, "Yeah, it's time to leave New Orleans." He's like, "Yeah, I want to put my house on floats." I said, "You don't have enough time." I said, New Orleans is sinking." And within a few months, after going back home, he's calling us, losing everything. His walls are falling in, and Katrina took his house.
Wow, unbelievable. So your family is actually seeing UFO-related stuff and Bigfoot-related stuff.
Yeah, in 2000, I moved here. In 2001, in 2000, my dad and his current wife, my stepmother, they went a different stepmother. This is his third wife. Had went down to Cancun for the Millennium, New Year's Millennium celebration, and they went down to the beach. Them and another couple. Went down to the beach to watch the fireworks. Well, they get down there and the fireworks start going off, but they're kind of in the light, so they can't see very well. So they move kind of down into the down the beach area where it's a little darker, and they park their seats or their chairs below this temple called the Temple of the Puma.
Okay.
And about that time, they hear this loud cat scream. And they look up into the sky, and they describe exactly what Alta and I described above Walmart. They get to see it above some Mayan temple. I get to see it above Walmart. So...
Well, it's the Mayan Temple of America.
Yeah, life's not fair.
Right. And do me a favor. I mean, this thing that you guys saw and was summarily seen there. What? Give me the best, most detailed description of it that you can give me.
The craft?
Yes.
Well, like I said, it's rectangle, but it's not as wide. It's wider in the back. And I say the back because it was moving, in the direction that the shorter, and it had about like 3 lights in the front and 3 lights in the back. Very squared and no seams, and moving very slow. And it was bigger than the Walmart and the parking lot combined.
Okay. How about the thickness of the edge? Any detail to that thickness of the edge? Any detail in there?
Maybe like a 2-story building.
Okay. As far as detail, like any kind of small parts on this thing that were jutting out, or any kind of discernible detail in that edge?
No, it was pretty squared.
Okay. And the front lights, were they, what shape were the front lights?
They were round.
Okay.
They were white. All the lights were the same color. All of them were the same. On my Facebook, or no, I guess I kind of made a rough sketch on I think it's on Alta's Facebook page. I'll have to open up that to you, but it's real basic. It's not there's not a whole lot. Yeah, I mean it was just like this big, huge. You know, it kind of reminds you of what was that? The 2010 Space Odyssey, the big black thing.
Yeah, the obelisk. Yeah.
Yeah, not an obelisk, but kind of the monolith. Yeah.
Okay, monolithic. Okay.
Yeah.
But
again, very metallic. And Dad and my stepmother described about the same thing that they saw in Cancun.
Huh.
And then my dad had an experience with my stepbrother, which is from my dad's second wife, the one that believes she was a white witch. Him and my dad and my brother, my brother was taking my dad to the airport in Atlanta, and it's a couple hours from here, and they're going through the Talladega National Forest, and early in the morning, driving, of course, it's early in the morning, and they see on the side of the road what they think is, like a hitchhiker or something, and, kind of stooped over his bag or something. And when they get up close, they realize this thing stands up. They said it was, now my brother talks about it more than my dad does. My dad don't like talking about things like that. But yeah, my brother said it stood up. It was huge, like 7, 8, 9 foot tall, hairy. He said it just casually kind of pivoted and turned towards the woods, away from the highway, kind of turned his head and looked at them as they drove past, and my brother said it just kind of walked off into the woods very casually, not skipping a beat.
Huh. Well, here's a question for both of you on that. I mean, do you guys kind of view Bigfoot as I think a lot of people do, which is an animal/man type cryptid, or do you see that as a paranormal experience?
I don't know. I've heard so many different stories, so I haven't come to a conclusion on that.
I feel, given those two choices, I would lean towards paranormal.
Okay.
Maybe a physical being that has paranormal abilities.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I see it differently than Chad. I've had an experience here on the property.
And tell me about that, Alta.
Okay, Chad was asleep. Jacqueline was here visiting. It was my birthday. I told you, my birthday seems to trigger a lot. My mother actually passed on my 40th birthday. And that was 3 months prior to us being taken off that street in 97. So this was another birthday that took place here a couple years ago. Jacqueline was visiting. She's the one that was taken with us in New Orleans. We had another girlfriend visiting that lived in New York City at the time. Her name Allison. They both came in to surprise me for my birthday. So we spent that day, my birthday, out on the lake, playing and partying all day long. Chad doesn't drink at all. I was drinking at the time. So he's not ingested anything other than he's exhausted. He's put up with 3 females all day long. And
yeah, poor baby.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Say it again.
The damn the luck.
That's good. Yeah, the 2 other girls were cutie patooties, so yeah.
All 3 of them.
Yeah, so that was real nice. That's a lot of years of marriage. So when we get home, Chad he goes to bed and just goes to sleep. He conks out. Jacqueline, she'd had a good party that day, so she comes in the house and she lays down on the couch and she passes out, goes to sleep.
Okay.
She's only a few feet away from this door that is real important to this story. Allison and I decide to go upstairs in the backyard on the deck and do a little sky watching. Well, that's a hoot. We've never done anything like that before. Haven't ever even talked about doing anything like that before. But Allison has shared with us she's having experiences up in New York. Her and her honey at the time had property up in upstate New York.
Shocker. Okay, continue. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, I've done a lot of research on this since. So I was not understanding too much at the time. So, they live in New York City, but they got this property up in upstate New York that they're having experiences on. And when I say that, I'm talking specifically UFO encounters that are pretty graphic, the way she's describing it to us. Mm-hmm. So we decide, her and I, we're going to go up and check out the sky. Now, I know this sounds ridiculous, but this is exactly how I remember it. We get up on the deck. We're not up there just long enough for her to put her chair in one direction and me to place mine in another. She has an instant experience. And what I mean by that is we're not talking a meteor or a falling star or a shooting star. She had an experience because I caught the tail end of it because I heard her scream. And when I look up, this star is dancing. Well, at the same time that happens, off to my direction, as ridiculous as this sounds, same thing happens to me. My direction, the opposite direction of her. A star zigzags. Again, as weird as this sounds, we decide, okay, well, that's enough of that. Yay! Let's go to bed now. What? What?
Right. Uh-huh.
But that's exactly how we experienced it. We decide, okay, that's enough. Let's go to bed. Instead of coming through the house and downstairs where the bedrooms were, we decided to come through the backyard. We walk through the small backyard to go through the French glass doors downstairs into the living room. When we get to those doors, before we can get the doors open, we begin to hear. I cannot describe the sounds to you. I will give it my very best. I can't describe it. There were so many, I could not count them. What I understood were Sasquatch screaming and yells. Now, I'm telling you that it was so freaking bizarre because I can't count. But instantly in my head, it was as if I was hearing every one of them individually. And there were so many, I can't count them. And this noise was so freaking loud, and it was coming out of the small woods that surrounded our house. It stopped us in our tracks. We both are just standing like deer in headlights as this sound is getting louder and building. Now, I mean, it's building. It's moving towards us, and it's coming at us like a wave, like an invisible wave of enormous sound and energy that you could almost feel and taste. Okay. As it rolled up on us, it was so loud that there was no way this town didn't hear it. And as it's coming up on us, I'm positive that we are goners. There's no doubt to me in that state of terror that we are dead. There is no way to escape whatever that is. These are monsters like nothing I've ever experienced before in my life. And in this invisible wave, it rolled up on us. Allison, I looked to my right where she was at. She had her hand on the doorknob. Allison was about to bolt through the glass. She was not even going to open up the door. She was going through it. And something inside of me, with my own voice, commanded her to stand. That's how it came out of me. Uh-huh. I looked at her, and something felt like it helped me, not of my own doing, to tell her to stand. Okay. She never moved. She was petrified. I was as well. And when I'm positive that it's over, that we are goners, it was as if there was an invisible hand above my head, turned off a switch, and it just went away. I had a Great Dane and a half Rottweiler Doberman at the time. And when Allison and I walked in the house, nobody moved. It was as if everybody was knocked out. My dogs never moved. And they were right there. Alice and I just hugged each other and went to bed.
Huh.
We got up the next morning. I can't believe that I ever went to sleep. And we got up the next morning, and we asked them what they heard. Did they hear anything? And they were both just looking at us like, no. And Allison and I tried to describe what we experienced and could not. And you heard how feeble I just was. It was unfreaking believable. And I cannot find a comparison story. But
Well,
it just unbelievable. And all invisible. As if a switch had been turned off above our heads. I don't...
sound stopped suddenly?
Instantly.
Instantly.
It was instant. It took time to build like a crescendo coming across the woods.
Okay, now let me ask you this. This may be hard for you to remember or not. When you saw the objects in the sky moving, did you have any feeling about that? Did you have any feeling? I mean, you said you got up and you said, okay, woohoo, and we're going to bed.
Yeah, I felt like job done, deed done.
Okay.
It's crazy. Thank you for that question. Nobody, again, has ever asked these questions. I've never had an opportunity to respond, but
so there's no sense of, I shouldn't be seeing this.
Not at all. It was as if...
Success, let's go to bed. Okay.
Whatever the hey that means.
Mm-hmm. How long did you talk about going sky watching before you actually did it? Was it spur of the moment, or was it? Did you toss around any banter beforehand?
It was instantaneous.
Okay.
Let's go up and skywatch.
Who came up with that idea?
Me.
Mm-hmm.
It was my doing.
Okay. Any feeling beforehand at all?
Let's go up and skywatch. Mm-hmm.
Just that no kind of no heaviness around the house, no anything. Just like, let's go do this.
We had just gotten home, and in all honesty, exhausted.
Okay.
That's again very interesting thinking back on it. We had a hard day playing out and partying out on the water on a boat, swimming, and then we went and had a big meal, a big dinner, and beyond pooped. We were pooped. And yet, let's go up and skywatch.
Right.
Okay. Chad, I'm going to bed. Al and Jacqueline just conked out.
Right. Well, that part of it certainly isn't unusual that they would conk out. That was kind of what I was getting at, is the idea that, you've been out, you've been active all day long, you've gone and eaten and all of that. By all rights, you should be dead on your collective backsides and heading out to bed, and instead you're going outside to look up in the sky for no apparent reason at all.
Exactly.
The sound itself, you say it was emanating from the small woods. I know this is probably an impossible question to ask, but the next day, did you walk to those woods? Did you go take a look? Did you look around? Did you see anything disturbed? Or anything at all? Was there any kind of anything after the fact?
Only from my property, and couldn't see anything. Have basically not been able to let up on it since it happened. Me personally, trying to always have some understanding of what I can't seem to get an understanding of. But something that just came to mind, Jeff, as you were posing that question, Chad and I'll have Chad, you'll actually hear his voice again. He's really here. We had an experience out in those woods in that corner of where that sound emanated from originally. Here's Chad. Hello.
Oh, yeah. We had just gone to bed one night, and this was early evening, and it was all of a sudden this glow came in from the window, which kind of lit up the room. It was like this big green, neon green, just this glow back in the corner of our property back here, right at the edge of the woods.
Yeah, it just came to me. We experienced this unbelievable green glow into our bedroom that emanated out of that area of woods that sound all rolled up out of. Same direction, same space.
How many sightings around the house
property,
now?
So we've never gone back in there.
Right.
It's owned by our next door neighbor.
Ah, okay.
But I have another real bizarre that if you've got time, if I could add.
I mean, I'm curious, how many sightings around the house now of odd things? Whether aerial or ground-based or house-based.
Right. Or if we may just add to the list, I would say, several. I haven't sat and count them. I think Chad's trying in his head right now. Numerous types of different experiences, as well as Chad and I both, our most recent experience separately, but it was an identical experience, took place in Stone Mountain, Georgia, which is, again, about 2.5 hours from us. Chad's father owns a locomotive business. He's in the locomotive business, and Chad works with him. And they had a contract in Stone Mountain, Georgia, amusement locomotives for tourism.
Okay.
And Chad and I both had a experience separately with what people call black, men in black stuff. I hear that language a lot. Ours were a car in black. I don't know if you've ever heard of anything like that before.
Just a car following?
In my case, it was, what happened was we were on site. Chad, we'd moved a small trailer there. We have a home, and we'd moved a small camper there so that I could be there with our dogs just a couple, miles up the road from the park where this contract is being done on their locomotives, rebuilding them. So while I'm home during the day, Chad would work until, around 6 in the evening, and I'm there all day by myself in this little park. All of a sudden, the last day I was there, actually, we were supposed to be there several months. So this was like almost a very bizarre experience that ended us being there in its weird manner. And what I mean by that is all of a sudden in broad daylight, I'm outside this little camper. This car pulls into the park that there was about 9 other campers in this little park. This car got my attention. It was, when I say black, I mean black. I mean black. Like a black that's just not normal black. And it's moving at a steady clip directly towards my place. Now, I'm not a shy kind of person, but I instantly became very uncomfortable. This is all anecdotal, but this is exactly how I experienced it. I was very uncomfortable. Right. Next thing I know, rather than that car pass me by, because I don't know this car, never seen anything like it, it looked like a gangster car, like a mafia car. Right. But it was so black. Chad's trying to help me here, because he had the experience 2 days prior to me, 2 days in a row. He saw it also in a different location, and he's saying like a Lincoln or a town car.
Modern day. In other words, modern day design.
Right. It's modern. Right. It's brand new, and it's so black you cannot see inside of it. Period. And it was right up at it was just a couple feet away from me. As it moved towards me, I became very uncomfortable. I've never done anything like that before, ever. Mm-hmm. I hustled myself up in my camper just as fast as I could move my little round hiney and locked myself in. Had my dogs in there.
Right.
I'm locked in.
Yeah.
This car stops in my little driveway. It sits there. I'm trying to look out my windows. I'm trying to peek. I'm scared to death for no reason.
Yeah.
It's just a black car, but it frightened me so.
Yeah.
It made me so uncomfortable. It's almost embarrassing repeating it to you.
No, I mean, I've had the same thing.
Hallelujah.
I was followed over the course of my college career 3 times, two in separate years, by, I mean, I don't know what else to call it other than a completely black car that to my knowledge even had like not your typical nickel chrome, but rather like a gunmetal. Instead of a chrome, it was like a dark chrome. And I should say that I went to a very small institute. It was severely intense training. It was there was only 20 students allowed in the school per year, were accepted in, and to get to our parking lot, you had to turn down actually an alley. And I remember this thing followed me essentially, I don't know, maybe a quarter mile from home, all the way to school and into an alley and into the parking lot. There were times where I made some very bizarre turns and going up around Memorial Stadium and circling the stadium and coming back down, 33rd Street and back down into the parking lot. And it literally sat there one time for almost 20 minutes until I called the police on the school phone. And no sooner than I had hung up, maybe within a minute, it was taking off and leaving.
Ooh, right.
And the curious part was no license plates.
Right. There was no, I don't even remember chrome on this car. I saw nothing but a black bullet, at a steady clip, slow enough, but at a steady clip, come directly to my drive, pull into my little drive a couple feet away from my front door, and just sit there. Yeah. And as hard as I tried to explore it, what the hey is this all about, the black of that car seemed to appear. And I saw I tell you, again, as crazy as I sound, it's like the freaking car was alive.
Yeah.
Like I was dealing with some kind of insane intelligence. Well, it was so embarrassing because I was so afraid. It sat there for what felt like eternity, but of course it was probably, 30 seconds. But it felt like it was forever, just sitting there. I don't even remember sound, but again, I'm inside. Right. And then it backed out, and it just, again, at a very steady clip, just drove away. Now, I'm all flipped out because I'm aware that I'm either losing my mind, and I'm scared because I'm conscious of that, or this is really something that doesn't make sense.
Right.
So I'm trying to pull it together to how am I going to tell Chad about this? Like, God, how do I explain this without him thinking I've really lost it? So when he comes home that evening, I tell him, as I just shared with you, he takes it all in. He just kind of nods and acknowledges me, so I know at least he heard me. And he doesn't really say anything. We just go on about our business. We have dinner, go to bed. He's exhausted, yada, yada. Next day would be a Friday. He comes home that evening unexpectedly and says, let's go home for the weekend. We had already decided we weren't coming home that weekend. He just all of a sudden decides we're going to come home this weekend. Okay, good. I don't even pack a bag because I know we're coming right back. When we're driving home for the weekend, Chad all of a sudden drops on me that he'd forgotten to tell me, oh, by the by, I had that experience with that car 2 days in a row, the day before you did.
Huh.
Now, he's right here.
Yeah, I would get up early in the morning, and where the camp was, where our camp place was, it was right next to this old cemetery. I mean, they had Civil War stuff in there. And So I would take the dogs and walk them around the cemetery. And I would get right up in the middle of the cemetery, and there was this black car. It would just sit there. You couldn't see in it. You couldn't tell if there was people in it or how many.
And this is like 5 in the morning.
Yeah, this is like 5 in the morning. I'd get the dogs past it, and then it would come on. The lights would come on, and it would drive off. And this happened like the 2 mornings before Alta treated.
Huh.
And this was, blocks away. So it was really crazy. And Alta said when we got back home, like not too far after we stopped going back to Stone Mountain, that a black car had pulled in here where we live, and just kind of pulled in, sat outside the front of the house for a few minutes. We live there's one other house on our drive off the main, and so if you don't live here, there's no reason to even come down this driveway.
Right, the private driveway, in other words.
Right, and it pulled in, it sat outside for a few moments, and pulled away. Nobody got out to knock on the door or look around or anything. It was just here and gone.
And so really no time to call a police or anything like that for a strange car.
No.
Yeah.
If I may add one last, what I just would like to air
Sure.
publicly and have your take on this, if you've got one. These little woods that we speak about that are not ours, that border our property, this has been, just a weird place anyway. And because it is not our property and we're not real close to who owns it, we haven't gone traipsing about on it. But in broad daylight, after that, what I call invisible Sasquatchy insanity took place here, this rolling up on us business. I don't know what else to call it. It's broad daylight. It's early morning. It's probably about 9 or 10 in the morning on a weekend. Chad's home. He's sitting in a chair, in a lawn chair in the backyard. I'm standing in those doors that I spoke about, those French doors. It's a beautiful day out. We've got the doors open. I'm only a couple feet behind Chad. I'm just sort of standing. He's drinking coffee, and we're just really enjoying the day around us. Out of nowhere, I let out a scream that sent Chad flying straight up out of the chair, coffee flying, because we expected, the way I screamed, for me to look down at my foot and see blood everywhere. And what I felt, it should have, something took a chunk out of the top of my left foot in front of both of us. That was so massive. Now, I'm telling you, I've had a lot of experiences, but there's never been any pain. This hurt so bad that I let out, like I said, a girl scream. And when we look down, all there is, and I have photos of this, is a perfect triangle excised out of the top of my foot with no blood, no redness, no nothing. Now, if that wasn't weird enough and painful, and thank God it took place in front of Chad, even if others might not think of him as a good witness, he's my witness to this insanity. That next-door neighbor that's got those woods that we're not real close to, he's got a whole back 40 that he could have put a lake in or a pond in. But rather than take his woods out behind his property like people do in the country, he took him out in the front. The woods that separated his property from ours, where he couldn't see our front yard, basically in the entrance of our house, he removed, and what he put in was a triangle pond. Now, I'm saying this man did this directly off of that triangle coming out of the top of my foot. And it's on the main road. I've never seen anything like it. This is a huge pond. I'm not talking about a little trickling. I'm talking about a pond big enough to put a boat in and fish. And it's there for me to look at every day of my life now. I look out my front door, and there is a massive triangle pond. Now, what the hey?
Well,
as the old Indians say.
I mean,
tell me.
To me, that I mean, granted, I've never heard anything precisely like that, but one of the things that seems to come up quite a lot for people who experience a lot of weird stuff is, I guess some people would call it coincidence or synchronicities or what have you, and those things happen a lot more than normal, or when they do happen, they are so out of the box that it's just damn near impossible to explain it to somebody and not have them think that you're crazy.
Exactly.
I mean, I hear this come out of you a lot, that, that I know how bizarre this sounds and how crazy this sounds. I mean, I think the thing that that makes you feel that way is because, all of the literature that's out there about any one of a paranormal experience. I mean, any number of things, whether it be ghosts or UFOs or cryptids or what have you. I mean, it's been at least my experience to notice that there is a lot left out of that literature that that the majority of people don't know about. And one of the big things is that this is not only a very strange experience on its face to the public, but it's an even stranger face to those who experience it. In other words, the bizarre quotient is through the roof.
Exactly.
And so, to hear invisible Sasquatch screaming at you after a UFO sighting, that may sound weird to you. To me, that has a ring of, well, it's that bizarre. It's that ridiculous.
Exactly.
And it's not only that. I mean, to me, that is that goes hand in hand with what I've said before, that more often than not, I think that the phenomena, if it presents itself in a really compelling way, that you cannot, you could say right off the porch, I had this experience of the UFO sighting, and I saw these things spinning around the sky. It was the most bizarre sight I ever saw. End of story. That could have been enough, and people would have thought, well, that's weird. How weird is it that she would go out there and deliberately look for something and then see it?
Right.
That in itself is beyond the norm, and frankly, it's strange credulity, right? You went out and looked for it, and you saw something that was completely unexplainable to yourself. But then the phenomena throws a curveball at you and says, well, you know what I'm going to do in addition to this? I'm going to throw in a Sasquatch scream that's going to scare the bejesus out of you. And you're going to want to tell people about that, but you can't, because if you do, they're never going to believe what you told them you saw on the porch. And so this is the paranormal escape hatch to me. That's what this boils down to. And, and what is that? I don't know what that is, but it is self-negating a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
I mean, the car thing, I don't know. I don't even know how much stock I put in my own experience with that. I mean,
right.
Immediately someone says, well, the government's following you. And I don't necessarily buy that story either. But clearly, to me, there's someone that is interested in what goes on. I mean, I have seen black cars in association with a major event in my life that had literally a bunch of old white-haired men standing around pointing in the direction where, days before my wife and I had a very significant UFO experience. Now, what was that? I have no idea what that was about. It could be completely innocuous, but I find it a little bit strange, and there's your synchronicity if it was a completely innocent thing. Is this the synchronicity that follows suit? Is it falling into that X-Files type category to where it's negating itself in some way? But I think I think what you've explained has been very forthright, and for that I'd say you guys are rare birds in the essence that you will talk about the extreme absurdity
exactly.
of what you've seen and what has happened and all of that. I thank you for being honest about that, and honest about your upbringing and your lives, and being very open to all of this. Another consistency seems to be, marginality. And I think anytime someone says, well, my stepmom was a self-proclaimed white witch and my mom took me for ESP training at a military base when I was little, or testing,
Right.
that immediately throws you in a marginal category. And I think it's to your credit that you address those things completely up front and say, this is what I remember and I don't remember anything more. So
it is the only truth I understand.
Well, that's it, and frankly, I think if more people, did what you do, which is to lay it out without edit, I think we'd be better off. I think we'd understand a little bit more about the truer face to the experiencer of what they had happened, rather than what we think fits into the box of outside the box, because it's just another box after all.
And with that box, if I might also add here at the end of this, just such gratitude to both of you for being you, and and doing what you do, and providing an opportunity for us to have a platform to, as I said, give this a voice. I'd also like to add that us coming forward, has opened up an opportunity for childhood friends of mine that I've not seen in 35 years to come forward, and both indicate that they've had experiences with me and without me in their life, in terms of, UFOs and so on and so forth, and very, very explicit, not they saw something flash in the sky, very up close and personal experiences that they have contacted me and shared with me. And I'm extremely grateful for that, because, as they've said, they would have never been able to do this. Who knows? But these are their words. They could have never come forward. They could have never said anything if somebody wouldn't have already opened the door to do it, where they felt safe. And that's why I say thank you to both of you so much for this opportunity for us.
Well, thank you. I got one final yes or no for you.
Actually, I can do that.
Actually, it's a tandem yes or no.
He's right here.
Yes or no, number one, do you feel on some level you know what this all is?
No, not for me, not yet. I think it's just...
You said yes, no.
Yeah.
So you're no.
And for me, no.
No. Okay.
No answers yet.
I have none.
And secondly, yes or no, when you engage this in, whether it be discussion with friends or between yourselves, or you study about it, or you focus more upon it, do you seem to get a response from the phenomena out of that? In other words, do you see something the more attention you pay to it?
Actually, I just told a few of my coworkers this story. I was driving them back from our job there in Stone Mountain, and we had 2 hours to kill. So I went into my story in great detail, and they were very surprised, but they didn't seem to not believe me.
And Alta, what about you? When you focus upon this stuff a lot, do you seem to get something out of it? I mean, do you get a sighting out of it, or do you get an experience out of it the more attention that you pay to it?
No, the more attention that's been paid to it, the more it would seem that I'm being quieted.
Really?
And what I mean by that is, I've continued, and as I said, I've just recently been accused of being desperate, because I keep reaching to all of you that, I understand are exploring this. I've had many doors shut to me, and I know that the experiences don't happen to me alone. I can tell you that every experience that I've had is always necessary to be with others when it happens.
Right.
It never happens to me by myself. And because there is so much quietness now around me, the harder I pursue trying to have understanding, the quieter the experiences have become.
Curious. Well, there you are, folks, and thank you guys very much, both of you, for coming on tonight and for sharing all that you did. And with that, Jeremy?
Yeah, why don't you tell everyone how they can find you on Facebook one more time?
Yeah, you can find us. I have my Facebook page is Chad Dillard. Alta's is Alta Dillard. It's two separate pages, and then we also have a we make traditional Native American shawls that we fuse together with other cultures and beliefs. We just got back from the Mothman Festival last month. We made a Mothman. We've done Sasquatch. I came up with the thing that everybody likes them, from Barbie to I forget what I said earlier, but it was kind of
It's a great advertising campaign.
Yeah.
Tell them what the name of the page is.
But it's Unique Rabbit Shawls, and it's UNEEK Rabbit Shawls. That's how you can find us on Facebook.
All right. Well, Alta and Chad, thank you again for your honesty and for going a lot longer than we had asked of you. A lot longer. I very much appreciate that.
We thank you very much for the opportunity.
Was that extraterrestrial?
So the Jeff.
So the Jer. Ha ha.
Ha! That never gets old.
We're in the same room.
That's right.
Ridiculous.
Still tired, by the way.
Yeah, exhausted.
Alta and Chad Dillard, eh?
Yeah.
We'll talk more about them perhaps on Sunday's show because we'll have a lot of time then. But let's, is there anything you briefly want to go over?
It's an interesting overall history. I mean, I would like to, I don't know. I mean, especially the stuff in New Orleans, particularly seeing the Shrouded Woman, whether you want to call that Marian apparition or not. I think that's an interesting story, but I'd like to hear more in depth of that. I would want to get more out of that story. Like, I don't feel like I got followed through in the right chronology to understand, like, how did you get from point A to point B, or did everything just vanish? And here's this woman, and here's these apparently what look like slaves. Mm. I mean, I don't know. I would like to be led through that in a more concise way to understand how that experience started and ended.
Well, just as an addendum to that experience, Alta wrote to me a little something here that she wanted me to read to you all. Alta writes, I just remembered speaking about the Virgin Mary experience and stated she had a glow. I think I left that as stated, but the truth is, her glow is pure energy, not in the physical. My point, as I'm giggling trying to explain, is that she was not lit up like a lamp. I need to figure out another word rather than glow.
Oh.
In a way, you know what, that kind of reminds me of that, whatever that woman is that you saw in your dining room who, when she dissolved, she sort of vanished into the background of everything in the room.
Yeah.
For some reason, it just reminds me of that it's created of the tapestry of reality. It sort of comes out of it.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. To me, I would like to hear that story from beginning. Like, what were you doing 10 or 15 minutes beforehand? Like, walk me through exactly how you got into that whole experience. That's what I would like to know. But I think that was, and particularly being told you need to get stable. I mean, did you take that the way I took that? Or?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's like, you need to get stable because you're not going to be able to handle what's coming next based upon the way you're living your life right now. You've got a lot coming at you.
That's why I jumped in on that, because I wasn't sure if you were going to, offer that up or not. Like, I knew what you were thinking.
I didn't want to say it. I really didn't. I didn't want to impose.
If you wanted to say it, so I decided to say it.
I didn't want to impose that on her, but I'm thinking to myself, yeah. But then again, I wonder what does that represent? If you're in an anti-structural situation and you're bringing about manifestations of weirdness, paranormal, whatever you want to call it, then in seeing that woman, what does that woman represent in some guiding force trying to guide you away from anti-structural behavior? Mm-hmm. I mean, what is that, I wonder? I mean, is there a plus and minus, a positive and negative to this whole thing that not in the positive and negative sense of good or bad, but two opposing forces that are kind of one's leading you into the anti-structure, the other one's trying to pull you out of it.
Well, it could even be as simple as, the one thing that you've certainly experienced in this phenomena is that it is personal to you, and so it could very well be whatever this is saying, you need to get stability.
Yeah.
Because you live in a voodoo temple in New Orleans.
Yeah, that was the other thing. That was
you live in a crazy life and you need stability.
Yeah.
Is it any different than saying cut sugar out of your diet, Whitley, or whatever?
It could, yeah. I mean, it could be. And it could be some manifestation of herself or something like that, the unconscious saying, you need to get stable. I found it interesting that both of them said that they didn't have an inkling on the side of somehow I know what this is, or it has a familiar feel to it, or anything like that. Like, they really, I think, genuinely said they didn't, it didn't feel familiar to them at all. And even inside, they feel like they don't know what this is. Like, it's a complete mystery to them as to what this is. Mm-hmm. And I think, I don't know, I've spoken to a lot of people. I mean, besides you and I, there's just been a lot of people that I've spoken to over the years who've said that they feel like on some level it has a familiar tone to it or a familiar air, and they feel like they kind of know what this is about on some level, but they can't parse it out. They can't figure out where that feeling comes from. I was kind of surprised to hear that, but that certainly isn't across the board. I don't get that from everyone, but a lot of people.
Well, I thought you had an interesting take on I was standing by a crater and there were piles of bodies behind me story. How about sharing your thoughts on that? I mean,
that's...
you said you've heard this quite a bit, that type of thing.
I've heard that type of thing a lot, yeah. I mean, there's always this... I call them screen memories, but I don't use that in the classic sense of, like, the Bud Hopkins screen memory of something injected that is complete and utter nonsense. I mean, there's always... It sounds weird to say this because in every sense, as we were just talking out in the living room, I think it's fair to say, or fair to maybe assume a little bit or guesstimate that whatever this thing is, it can present itself in any number of different ways and fool you with any number of different masks that it may wear. But there's always a sour note in there somewhere. And I think the sour note in that story is the piles of unconscious people behind her. And it almost looked to me like, oh, I'm Ashtar, or I'm... Semyazi, and look at me, and aren't I beautiful, and look at this, and look at the grandeur, and all. So it's kind of being blindsided while, never mind those bodies behind you, that's nothing. It's kind of like that diversionary, like there's something it can't hide, and that something was those piles of people behind her. That seemed... Remember her saying that seemed really, I forgot all about them, like that became completely inconsequential to the entire experience. And to me, that sounds like not necessarily that it didn't happen, but that something was trying to provide her with kind of an alternate view of what was going on. Was the grandeur laid up before her in the way of this crater and this woman, was that all real? I don't necessarily believe that was the fly on the walls experience, if you get what I mean. But I think there's something that it can't hide. The piles of unconscious people seems more along the lines of there's some symbology there, or there's something there that is being, or trying to be covered up with this very pleasant, amazing person.
Yeah, well, there's, even going back to the so-called Marian vision where, it starts off with these three slave girls, and then she feels someone behind her, turns around, there's Mary. I mean, I think, we need Carl Jung to start looking at this stuff, and, I think, and even thinking about, my own stuff and your own stuff. I don't know, did I say this on the show last week, or I can't even recall if I just said it to you in private, but it feels like maybe because we're experiencing this, it's easy to fall into the trap of the same way that ufology does of, well, we're by definition outside of the box and therefore deeper. And so, but even that deep experience has a shallow end to it.
Exactly.
It's fractal geometry, right? It's got a depth, it's got a shallowness, it's got a depth, it's got a shallowness. And so while we're thinking that whatever is being said to us or emoted at us is the depth of it. Maybe we need to start looking at the imagery that's the thing that we keep sort of just talking past. Maybe it's time to start looking at some of those details. Taking
a step back at the same time. I mean, to look at the details is fine as long as you don't lose sight of what the bigger, I'm always looking at what surrounds it now. I mean, since talking to Hansen, I mean, this is where I always go, is what is surrounding the instance. I look at that almost more than I do what is the experience going on. Yeah,
surrounding the instance, but that too. But just the, what does the actual imagery mean? I mean, we don't really address that a whole hell of a lot. What does the imagery mean? But I mean, certainly, you've seen it in your life where the imagery ends up meaning something. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's time to start looking at that a little bit more heavily as we go forward.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. But I thought that was an interesting memory that she had of standing on that crater. I mean, I think and I've heard so many things that seem consistent to that. And I want to say I've even had someone tell me over the years that there was something about, I mean, that was very lunar-esque, right? I mean, it was the freaking moon.
Yeah,
I mean, okay, let's be straight about it. It was the moon. I've had a lot of people tell me about seeing these moon vistas and being beside someone and they're not wearing any oxygen helmet or anything that, keeps them alive in an atmospheric environment that's not conducive to life. And yet there they are, they're standing there looking at this and it's beautiful, but yet there's this sour note somewhere along the line. There's either an unconscious person or there's people staring at them and it's, oh, well, don't pay attention to it. Let me show you this. Look at it's always kind of like that diversionary type of thing. And I look at that and I go, I don't think any of that is reality as the hyper reality exists. I think that is a memory, but there's some snippet of something in there that isn't right. And so if you look at this way, if that imagery and that experience occurred in the mind and that memory was concocted by the phenomena in order to divert whatever it may be, I mean, for whatever reason, I think somehow there's something in our minds that recognizes what this is and tries to ID it, but they circumvent that by placing this memory or by concocting this scenario. But yet, us seeing the weirdness of it or the surrealistic nature of it, our minds also concoct the sour note. So that's not like they're trying to hide something. We concoct that sour note through our own perception of what we're seeing. And that's kind of how I looked at that. I mean, I've heard that before.
That's really interesting. So, and even the sour note isn't necessarily warning about something. We don't know what it is.
No.
But it's a recognition.
It's a recognition
of the mind trying to tell you.
You're in this. Hello. You're here. This is not this. This is something else, which I can't parse out. And so I'm throwing this sour note in an effort to kind of make you wake up and realize this. You should be paying attention to this. And instead, what the perception, mirage, whatever you want to call it, whatever that does, is leading us further away from that. Because when she talked about seeing this woman, she could have cried. She was so perfect. I mean, if there was a nature of perfection, this was it. She was completely enamored and swallowed into that woman, that facade of that woman, and looking at her.
And she didn't even get that with Mary, which is interesting.
Right, exactly. You get it with the person standing on the edge of the crater, but yet you've got this rather macabre scenery behind them.
Right. And the thing that sort of made her extremely fearful, right, was just looking up and seeing stars. Was that it?
Yeah.
So it wasn't even seeing the bodies, but the bodies she saw in her periphery, right, if I'm remembering correctly?
Right, well, yeah, behind her. I think she looked at them directly once, but yeah.
So, I don't know, it's interesting to me that there's something about even diverting your attention away from the main thing in front of you, looking up, checking out your environment, sort of breaking the trance, as it were.
Right.
Boom, she's in fear. And then they got to calm her back down. No.
Exactly. Stay with us here. Stay with us. I mean, doesn't that feel like something is leading you through a concocted perception of something? That's just what it seems like to me. Like, if you were a fly on the wall, what was really going on with Alta at that point in time? If you were a fly on the wall, what would a third party have seen? This is always the big question for me. And the question is, would you have seen anything? Number one. But if so, I mean, would she have been, surrounded by some kind of beings that were all kind of collectively concocting this alternate reality that she views. And that's another thing that I'm hearing a lot, just from people writing me. I had a guy write me a couple of weeks ago, talked about something we've never spoken about on the show, but yet Whitley's talked about, and a couple other people have talked about it, is all of a sudden going from the reality that you're in right now, and all of a sudden, boom, you're somewhere else. You're in some other extended reality that doesn't seem entirely normal to this one. Mm-hmm. But yet it feels familiar and it seems familiar, but yet, people are missing, according to other witnesses. They don't see that person there, and then that person kind of, is in their living room all of a sudden. It's like, where the hell have you been? They almost exist in this parallel universe type of thing. And I wonder how prevalent that's going to be, like even in the core stuff. Is that going to show up in there heavily or not, or maybe just a sprinkle here and there? I wonder what the fly on the wall sees with something like that, because clearly I don't find that scenario and that scene to hold true with, I don't know, what you would seem to expect is never what you're going to expect, but something doesn't hold right about that. It seems diversionary to me, and it seems suspect as a real experience of being on the moon and standing there looking over this crater. It seems like there's something diversionary in that. So, I don't know.
To be continued on Sunday, old friend?
Yes.
Very good. And perhaps we'll get into some tree snufflers.
Oh, Jesus.
Tree snufflers?
Yeah, we might, yeah.
We'll explain that later.
Yes, we've been talking out in the living room, and I don't know. I'm not willing to put a whole lot of stock in that, as I said, but it's a little weird. So
yeah, there's your cliffhanger. Enjoy your pancakes over the weekends, folks.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that's all I got. Time for Betty Bye for me.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Sweet dreams, Paratopia, and thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Was that extraterrestrial?